can only accomplish this through local champions and drivers, and so really appreciate you guys being our local hosts here to really promote our goal of getting guys to take better care of themselves. With that, we're going to play a short intro video, and then Dr. Joshua Brody is going to do a quick introduction from the University of Minnesota, and he'll introduce the speakers for today. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having us speak. We're broadcasting from the University of Minnesota here in Minneapolis. We've got a very sunny, nice day today. We have 3 speakers lined up for you today. We have, first we'll be speaking is Dr. Christopher Waite. He has worked for a few years here at the University of Minnesota. He came to us from the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic, is where he did his training. He'll be speaking about raising awareness for urologic cancers, especially kidney cancer. Next we'll have Dr. Gerald Tim. He's a PhD engineer who works in our Department of Urology here at the University of Minnesota. He was involved with inventing the inflatable penile prosthesis. So really fascinating guy. We're really happy to have a lot of the prosthetics in urology have origins here in Minnesota. And then I'll speak third, and I'm going to speak a little bit about just, testosterone replacement and some controversies regarding that. So I think we have our first speaker.
Well, welcome to everybody to sunny Minneapolis. It's not this way all the time. We love it in the summer, we love it in the winter too. I want to talk to you about kidney cancer research a little bit and advocacy and what men can do and why it's important to men. Kidney cancer is not often talked about when it comes to cancer. There's lots of runs and ribbons for breast cancer and prostate cancer. But kidney cancer, though it's one of the most common cancers in the United States, is rarely talked about, rarely advocated for. And why it matters to men is that most of the cases of kidney cancer are diagnosed in men. There are 2 men diagnosed with kidney cancer for every 1 woman that's diagnosed with it. And if you were to take all the money that the federal government uses for funding cancer research, it's about $1 billion. And if you were to determine how to divide up how that funding should go, this is how it currently stands today. These are from 2012. Breast cancer gets the lion's share of funding of over $600 million a year. Lung, prostate cancer get in the 200 millions. Kidney cancer gets a small amount, only 49 million comparatively. And if you were to ask this question, well, how should we divide up funding? Well, you might say, well, maybe we should choose the highest incidence. So whichever cancer it occurs the most often in the United States. Or you could say, well, maybe we should just take the one that's most lethal, the one that's more likely to kill people for every case that comes along. But you wouldn't think that you should fund it based on how many news stories there are, but that's a factor that we might have to talk about. If you look at these 3 potential possibilities, so the most common, here they are listed in the order of most common of these top 5 cancers. Funding does not follow the most common, so the highest incidence does not equate to the most funding. You might think, well, the most deaths, the most people that die from cancer, that should get the most funding. Again, you can see that there's a disorganization between actually how the funding is distributed and how many people are dying from these cancers. And not most lethal, and most lethal I mean how many people die from it when they are diagnosed with it. There's very little correlation at all between NIH funding and how lethal the cancer is. But what about news stories? Well, here's a graph that shows that news stories are actually the closest correlating predictor of how the NIH decides to fund cancer research, with breast cancer having the lion's share of news stories every year and getting the lion's share of funding. And in fact, if you list them out, breast cancer has the most news stories and gets the most funding. Lung cancer and prostate cancer are swapped around a little bit with funding, and that's due to efforts such as this that is trying to raise awareness of men's issues. But kidney cancer has very few stories and gets very little funding. In fact, if you were to look at kidney cancer and look at the number of news stories in national media outlets on an annual basis, kidney cancer only gets about 80 a year. Compare that to other diseases like breast cancer, where there are close to 4,000 a year. Well, I know this event is a lot about what men can do, and the interesting thing about kidney cancer is there are things we can do about our health to prevent it. We know obesity is a growing problem in the United States, as represented in this graph. It's increasing. Interestingly, kidney cancer is also increasing. This top blue line shows the rising rate of kidney cancer in the United States, and this graph shows that it's going up in all ages and both genders. And that's because there's an associated risk with kidney cancer and the development and obesity. And BMI is above 35, you increase your risk of getting kidney cancer by about 70%. Whereas smoking, which is also a risk factor for kidney cancer, only increases the risk by 60%. So obesity is a rising epidemic. So part of what we have tried to do to help address this is start an organization called Climb for Kidney Cancer, which aims at increasing the awareness of kidney cancer, the connection between lifestyle and kidney cancer, and make this knowledge available to men so they can make a difference in their life and hopefully prevent the risk of developing kidney cancer. We have a stadium race annually here at TCF Bank Stadium. You can run all 6,054 stairs. We just had it a few weeks ago, and it's a great event, and we're looking for other stadiums across the country to get this started. So if anyone wants to contact us, we'd love to collaborate on this. This was just a picture from a family of a patient of mine. She unfortunately passed away this year from kidney cancer. But the family dressed up, the girls dressed in tutus, and the guys dressed up in athletic clothes. They climbed the 6,000 stairs. We don't limit it just to stadium, though, because we know that by living a healthy lifestyle, you may be able to lower your risk of kidney cancer. There's a lower rate of kidney cancer in runners. And so go out and climb anything. This is, some of us went with a patient to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and we climbed Devil's Tower for kidney cancer. There's a picture with a GoPro looking over my shoulder down toward the ground below. This is a medical student of ours that went to Puerto Rico and climbed a rock there, hashtag Climb4KC or C4KC. You can climb anything, stairs, trees, telephone poles. And it's a way, if you hashtag, or you can follow us on climbforkidneycancer.org is our website, and at Climb4KC on following social media. You know, we may not be able to control the number of news stories about cancer. I think events like this are great because they can increase awareness of men's cancers, and they increase news stories about cancers, and that will lead to increased funding, hopefully, for cancers that affect men's health. Just what we can control, though, is our social media. And here's just another insight. These are tweets per day about breast cancer, almost 1,500 a day. Here are men's cancers, like prostate cancer, only 200 a day. Kidney cancer, sometimes as few as 10 a day. This is something we can control by making a tweet today, and we can increase the awareness, and events like this can continue to raise awareness for these cancers, and then it will translate into increased funding for the cancers that affect men. Thank you very much.
We just had a quick question. I know you have to leave, but smoking, I think you mentioned obesity.
Yes.
We're asking to see how does smoking correlate with kidney cancer?
Yeah, smoking increases your risk by about 60%. The way we think it causes that increased risk is the toxins that are in cigarettes go into your bloodstream. Your kidney's job is to filter blood, and as it filters the blood, some of those toxins get lodged in the kidney, and it causes damage, and down the road increases the risk for kidney cancer. We're still not absolutely sure how the obesity plays a role yet. That's still an active area of research. Great.
Thanks so much, Chris. Next speaker is Dr. Jerry Tim. We'll talk about engineering devices in urology. Thanks, Jerry.
Inviting me, and I thought it would be of interest, or we thought it would be of interest to talk a little bit about prosthetic devices in urology. And some of you probably wonder where they come from. And what happens is there's typically engineers that sit in the background, work in the lab, and we interact with physicians, and they tell us problems that they're having, and we go back to the lab and try to see if we can come up with solutions. When we talk about urological needs, when I approach it as an engineer, I usually like to break it into segments. Kind of helps me with problem solving. And these are 6 of the major areas that urologists are concerned with. My whole career has been focused on erectile dysfunction and incontinence, and today I'm going to be speaking primarily about incontinence. So when you look at a problem area, you have to identify which ones to give priority to. Obviously, the first thing is a patient need. You want to come up with some kind of a proprietary solution with the goal of improving outcome, and either improving outcome, clinical outcome, or decreasing the cost. Obviously, a solution you come up with, in order for it to be useful around the country and around the world, it has to be manufacturable, and obviously you'll have to teach people about how to use it. When we first started working in prosthetic devices, there were not a lot of prosthetic devices available, and so we ended up having to teach the whole marketplace about where prosthetic devices could be used. And really what it boils down to is being in the right place at the right time, and some of us learn how to take advantage of those situations. I'm going to talk today primarily about bladder control, and the function of the bladder, as you know, is primarily storage of urine with intermittent emptying at an acceptable, socially acceptable time and place. There are several different kinds of incontinence that we're concerned about, and it happens in both men and women. Stress incontinence, urgency and urgent incontinence, and mixed incontinence. And there's something called overflow incontinence as well, in certain patients that have lost the ability to tell when their bladder is full. It's a very debilitating problem. We estimate approximately 13 million U.S. adults are afflicted, with approximately 200 million around the world. It's one of the leading causes for nursing home admissions, and people that have urinary control disorders end up as prisoners in their own home. They really are socially debilitated. There's a lot of money spent on this, and as you can see, $26 billion annually. A lot of it spent in nursing homes, with some of it being spent on management products. Those are things like diapers and things like that. And treatment products, as you can see, a very small portion of this whole thing is being spent actually on treatment. So, because there's just not a lot of options available. There's a variety of devices been developed over the years. Many of these I was involved with in my early years at the University of Minnesota. After finishing my PhD in electrical engineering, I was recruited into urology, or actually neurology. A fellow who was interested in patients with spinal cord injury, many of whom had urinary control disorders, and we were trying to adapt cardiac pacemaker technology to urinary bladder control. And that's how an electrical engineer got down in the plumbing system here. So anyway, I've been pretty active in that area for quite a number of years. There's quite a few devices that have been developed over the years and different treatment options that are available, but as you can see, it's still only 230 million out of the $27 billion that's being spent annually. So a lot of opportunity for innovation and for better improved care. This is one of the very first devices that I was involved with the development of, the artificial urinary sphincter. It's basically an inflatable cuff that goes around the urethra that leads out of the bladder, and you can very precisely control the pressure in that cuff so that you can stop urinary leakage but not impede vascular perfusion. The device has a pump that can be controlled by the patient, so the individual that has this device inside can squeeze the bulb and empty the cuff and allow for unimpeded urinary voiding, and it automatically refills, restoring them back to their common condition. As I mentioned, there's other management options that are available as well, and one of the largest ones that you can imagine is absorbency products, which many people find to be acceptable, but in the long term we think that there's probably a better solution. There's about 2.7 billion of the annual costs are associated with primarily with absorbency products. There are other devices available. This happens to be one that was developed by a colleague of mine from Ljubljana, Slovenia. He developed a series of vaginal weights that women, by inserting them vaginally, it's like a muscle training program, and there's a series of weights that they grade up to successively heavier weights, and the process of resisting gravity forces them or encourages them to do Kegel exercises properly. So a lot of unmet needs for urinary control restoration, a lot of opportunities, I'd say, for innovation. We did a study. One of the things when I first came back on the faculty here, it's about 12 years ago, I had a student who was a female athlete, and I just read this paper that reported on urinary control disorders in female athletes in elite dancers. And so we reproduced the study and found a large number of our athletes had this problem. Well, that stimulated us to look further into this. Why are these young women who are probably in the prime physically part of their life having urinary control disorders? And so we've been working on some modeling work to try to find out what the cause might be. So we started off by mapping, anatomical structures and trying to develop a finite element model. And with those of you that aren't familiar with finite element modeling, you can take literally any object and you can break it into teeny tiny little parts, and you develop a mathematical relationship between each teeny tiny little part, and you scale it back up to a full size, and you can run simulation studies. It's like how they teach people to fly. That's a very common we use technique. We're developing it now for surgical instruction, to develop simulators that surgeons can learn how to do surgery on simulators, and we're using it to try to simulate the conditions that are producing urinary control problems. It's a complicated process. You start out with an MRI image and you segment it and you do this modeling work and you do some surface reconstruction and you end up with something that looks like the part in part C on this diagram. Part of the problem is you have to develop also a tissue property database. Not everybody's tissues have the same properties, so we're trying to develop a property database that will be useful in our use of for our simulation studies. You come up with curves like this. Kind of imagine tissue. Some of it is contractile, some of it is not, but it all has different types of tensile properties, and we come up with graphs that look like this that we can then plug into that little formula I was telling you about that talk about the relationship between the adjacent parts. So we do a computer simulation of female urinary incontinence. The problem is it's very difficult to identify pelvic muscles and fat tissues and separate some of it out. So this is a work in progress, and it's going to take us a little while before we get it perfected. But I think it offers a lot of possibilities. Here's one of the. I can get it to work. Nope, not going to work. Oh, there it is. We come up with, this is obviously a very simplified version of a simulation that we can do, and you can tell what it tells you is it tells you how the stress levels are distributed in the pelvis during a physical exercise. This happens to be one where we simulated a jump from a 3-foot platform, and you can see the speed of this was obviously not in sync with the way it normally would occur, so we still got some work to do to make this thing be more clinically useful. To run one of these simulations, we used our Minnesota Supercomputer Institute computer, and we had to run for 18 hours to run one simulation because of the complexity of the anatomical structures and the various information that was involved. So let's talk about what the future might be. You can see there's, we want to continue to refine our computer model. We want to continue to do simulations and make sure that our model is valid and that it complies and is consistent with what is really happening. And then we want to obviously validate it with a clinical population, because our idea would be to come up with patient-specific models that could be useful in any specific individual patient. When we talk about the future of urology, the DNA molecule was first described in 1853 by Jim Watson and Crick. And it took till 1971 before we were able to describe the human genome. And so I did this thing where I thought, well, I'm going to talk about the future. Oops, didn't work. Let's go back one. So there's opportunities for innovation, and my more recent involvement has been also with the arts community, so I thought as a way to demonstrate, oh, it's not going to work, okay. I was going to demonstrate it anyway. I found 2 women from our University of Minnesota Gopher Performance Dance team, and they executed the double helix for me. They came and ran and jumped on those 2 poles and did the double helix for me. So anyway, I'm not able to show it, but anyway, I want to thank them anyway for participating. And this is Rachel and Mary, and then I want to thank them for participating, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Josh Bodie. I do the andrology and male infertility and microscopic surgery here at the University of Minnesota. I'll be talking a little bit about testosterone replacement and monitoring and such. As far as testosterone replacement therapy goes, it's a very big hot topic and somewhat of a controversial topic in men's health right now. During the last 5 to 10 years, the market for testosterone replacement has really grown rapidly, both on the products available as well as on clinics that are developing or springing up around the country to market only for testosterone replacement and monitoring in men. From 2005 to 2009, the spending on testosterone replacement has increased about 115%, and the number of prescriptions is rising annually. In the previous 10 years, from around 2000 to 2010, only 2 topical testosterone gels were available. In 2011 alone, 3 new topical gels hit the market. The prevalence of low testosterone is pretty high. There was a study in 2006 that showed about 39% of men over age 45 have a testosterone, total testosterone level under 300. But there was another study by Arujo who found that the prevalence of symptomatic androgen deficiency is maybe only 4% in men under 50 and 8% in men over 50. A similar study called the European Male Aging Study indicated that only 2% of men aged 40 to 80 have symptomatic androgen deficiency. So if we have about 40% of men who may have a low testosterone lab, but only maybe 2 to 10% who are symptomatic, providers need to be pretty cautious and selective about who we're treating with testosterone replacement. I think the reasons for growth in the testosterone market have been the aging population. As the baby boomers are all getting to retirement age, the number of men over age 65 is increasing about 2 to 3 times faster than the number of men under 65. Recent studies are starting to shed more light on the association of poor testosterone with poorer overall general health and possibly increased mortality. There's less concern for prostate cancer from testosterone replacement, or vice versa, testosterone replacement after being treated for prostate cancer. It's hard to watch TV without seeing some kind of a TV commercial with direct consumer to or company to consumer direct advertising for testosterone products. And there's a lot of elaborate marketing campaigns looking at these drugs, saying that these drugs are going to be a solution for low energy, low libido, maybe other ills. Some testosterone replacement clinics would tout testosterone as a way to prevent aging, or reverse aging. I think more men are certainly taking an initiative to ask about testosterone. It's more, I think, more socially acceptable to ask about it or ask to get a testosterone check. But I would note that the testosterone replacement therapy is really only FDA approved for medical conditions or symptoms or conditions with a low testosterone, such as pituitary problems or medical conditions that cause low testosterone. It's not necessarily approved for symptoms related to aging or declining sex drive and such. Common symptoms of low testosterone may be low libido, erectile dysfunction, less intense orgasm, in severely low testosterone, osteoporosis or low bone mineral density, oligospermia, atrophic testes, hot flashes, night sweats, especially if you've had a sudden decrease in testosterone, such as we see with prostate cancer therapy, breast sensitivity, breast enlargement, maybe less secondary sexual hair. Symptoms men complain of depression, decreased energy, decreased muscle mass, increased fatigue. It takes longer for them to recover from a physical workout and such. It's very important if a man is symptomatic and is found to have a low testosterone level to not just immediately get treated, because there's different causes, and the causes are in 2 main categories, either primary or secondary. Primary low testosterone or primary hypogonadism is due to failure of the testicles themselves to produce testosterone. That can be from genetic or other congenital issues. Anything that traumatizes the testicles, such as unscented testicle or congenitally absent or abnormal testicles, toxins, radiation, chemotherapy, bad infections like mumps, trauma, infarction, torsion, to some extent aging. Secondary, and that's poor testicle function. That's probably what most people think of when they think of low testosterone. But there's something called secondary hypogonadism as well, which is really due to lack of signal from the pituitary gland, which is in the brain, down to the testicle to drive testosterone production. And that can be from sometimes congenital problems, sometimes from things as serious as a brain tumor. So you'd hate to miss a diagnosis of that just simply by replacing testosterone, which would initially fix the patient's symptoms, but may not be addressing the underlying cause, which could be very serious. We also tend to see suppression of the pituitary signals in patients taking a lot of exogenous, certainly if you're taking sex steroids, if you're taking testosterone or estrogen, that will suppress a man's own testosterone production. So that's important to note that men who are thinking about taking testosterone, it's not like what the prescription that you take adds to the amount that you're taking. If you take enough testosterone and for long enough, it's actually going to turn off your own production. And then it really becomes something that you get hooked on, and it's very difficult to get off of. Also, sometimes you see in men who have chronic pain issues or opioid addiction, who are taking methadone for opioid addiction. Many times that chronic narcotic use suppresses the pituitary hormones, and we see low testosterone. The laboratory diagnosis of testosterone, it's very important that it's drawn in the morning. Testosterone tends to be high in the morning. Your body level tends to testosterone is high in the morning, low in the afternoon, and high again in the morning. So if you check it the level late in the day, at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, you don't really know, is it really low or is it just drawn at the wrong time of day. So checking it, it's okay to screen for testosterone later in the day, but if you suspect a low value, it should be rechecked as a morning blood draw, preferably in the 7 to 10 a.m. range. Generally, men, if their testosterone is under 250 or so, will probably feel symptomatically better. If their testosterone is over 300 or 350 to 400, they're probably not going to feel much different if they're on testosterone replacement. And it's really true that there's no normal limit of testosterone. There's a lab normal range, which is statistically where most men will fall, but that doesn't mean it's the symptomatically normal range where they will not have symptoms if they have a normal testosterone in the lab normal range, or that they would be symptomatic if it's below the lab normal range. Many different options for testosterone treatment, either topical patches or gels, injectable testosterone. Within the last year, we've had now available in the United States is testosterone undecanoate, which can be dosed as infrequently as every 12 to 14 weeks. So that's a nice for people that need an injectable testosterone. We now have a longer acting one. There's really no tablets for testosterone. There are some buccal tablets or oral medications, but those are not swallowed. Those are not been in wide use as far as my practice. There are relatively few risks of testosterone replacement, and there's relatively few reasons to withhold treatment. Absolute contraindications would be men with any active or known prostate cancer or breast cancer. Especially prostate cancer, testosterone is a growth factor for prostate cancer, and that would likely make their PSA go up and make their cancer grow more. Men who have significant high hemoglobin levels, high hematocrit, basically thick blood, increased red blood cell production, that could be exacerbated by testosterone replacement. There's some speculation that testosterone replacement may worsen sleep apnea or cause sleep apnea. That's a relatively debated topic, and it's probably not a true association, but I tend to mention it to patients. If there's any untreated severe congestive heart failure, the testosterone may cause some fluid overload or fluid retention. Testosterone replacement may be relatively contraindicated in quote-unquote men with a high risk of developing prostate cancer, such as maybe older men or specific races. Men of African descent tend to have a tougher time with more common to have prostate cancer, or maybe more worse forms. If there's a debated whether, say, a man is treated for prostate cancer and quote unquote cured. That's probably not that situation is probably not a contraindication for being on testosterone, but we don't have really great long-term data to answer that question. Close monitoring is certainly required every 3 months or so at first. And the fact is that most men, after they have a prostatectomy, for example, they don't have a low testosterone of 100 or 50. It's probably in the normal range, somewhere in the 300 to 500 range. So if a man is really truly symptomatic and has his prostate cancer taken care of, it's becoming more acceptable now to treat them. Testosterone is taken by over 2 million American men, mostly for symptoms that are largely part of aging. Low energy, decreased libido. We see a lot of men seeking testosterone replacement for poor erections. And that might not be the right answer. We need also to look at comorbidities. Are they diabetic? What's their cholesterol? What are their lipid values? Are they a smoker? And I'm very cautious to counsel patients that testosterone replacement is not a substitute for managing other health issues. The pattern of current testosterone, widespread testosterone prescribing has alarmed some medical experts. The Food and Drug Administration has argued that the benefits for healthy aging men are really unproven. These drugs could be risky. We've seen a huge upsurge in prescriptions in recent years, suggesting that testosterone is probably being prescribed to men who are simply reluctant to the fact that they're getting older. Anyone who's grown up kind of in the 80s or 90s recognizes Hulk Hogan was a professional wrestler. Testosterone use has quadrupled since 10 years ago for men in their early 40s. Testosterone levels decline by about 1% after about age 30 or 40 years old. And is this pathologic or is it normal aging, and can we tell the difference? What do we know the difference? In 2011, nearly 1 in 25 men in their 60s were taking testosterone. In September 2014, there was an FDA expert advising panel which voted that they felt testosterone labeling should be changed to reflect heart risks of testosterone. Some studies have shown a higher risk of cardiac events in men taking testosterone, especially older men over 65. But the evidence for heart problems is mixed. A 2010 trial found an elevated risk of heart attack and strokes among men taking testosterone, and the trial was stopped as a result. Other trials have found no increased risk. Some population-based studies have shown perhaps a lower incidence of heart events or cardiac events in men in the highest quartile of testosterone. Inappropriate prescribing, though, probably is an issue, and don't kid yourself, this is big business. This is a $2 billion industry in the United States. It's not always done correctly. One study suggested that maybe about a quarter of men who are prescribed testosterone haven't even had a baseline check of their testosterone level. The long-term risks really haven't been fully quantified yet, but they are being studied, and there's some studies ongoing. FDA data show that men ages 45 to 64 receive about 60% of all testosterone treatment. Men over 65 are just only 20% of that are men getting those prescriptions. So I think as men we need to recognize the dangers of seeking a quick fix for aging or age reversal. I can't emphasize enough that we can't use medication to avoid diet and exercise and to manage comorbid conditions like smoking, diabetes, cholesterol. And I think doctors, we need to be a little more cautious about prescribing. I think studies will show and time will tell, but the testosterone replacement therapy outcomes may really mimic what estrogen replacement was a decade or two ago. For many years, doctors were convinced that hormone replacement helped women after menopause. But a fairly important study, the Women's Health Initiative, found that hormone replacement for menopausal women actually increased risk of blood clots, strokes, breast cancer, and did not protect these women against heart disease. So is it menopause, like menopause? Is it menopause, as suggested in this time cover from August 2014, or is it normal aging? And we're not sure, and I think it's still on an individual treatment. I think is still on an individual basis right now. But these are questions that are controversial topics in urology and in hormone management right now, and we still don't know all the exact answers, but there are some cautions that should be noted. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
We're going to have a little Q&A session, and the topics that both of you covered are always very hot and popular on social media. So I've been tweeting and trying to respond, but I'm going to get you guys involved in some of this stuff. So one question was, what is the most, right here, this guy was asking, what is the most common symptom of low testosterone?
Well, that's just it. There's not one particular symptom you can say is only due to low testosterone. There's a lot of medical problems that overlap and have a lot of the same symptoms. So low thyroid function, sleep apnea causes a lot of daytime tiredness and fatigue, depression. So I don't think that there's any one symptom. I think even looking at libido there's good evidence that testosterone level, complaint of low libido is not a very sensitive indicator of testosterone level measuring under 300 or even under 200. So there's not any one particular symptom. I think the thing to look for is a group of symptoms that seem to make a story together. So
that's what we always say as well, is it's not just one symptom, and a lot of the symptoms are kind of vague. Exactly. But I have been seeing a lot more patients come in and ask us, hey, I'm having erectile issues. Can I get on low testosterone? I know you've done a lot of research on this topic as well, and you as well. I'm just trying to see, is there good data out there that shows they can help erectile quality? Because my understanding is it purely can help the libido, not the actual quality of the erection.
That's what I tend to tell people. Unless they have a really dramatically low testosterone, under 100 or under 50, it's relatively uncommon for low testosterone to cause erectile dysfunction. I think that's just what I see in practice. It's almost, if you look at the breakdown of the etiology of erectile dysfunction, about 40% is vascular, about another 20 or 25% is diabetes, and the other wedges of the pie are pretty small. I think endocrine causes, truly low testosterone causes, is about 3% of overall etiology of erectile dysfunction. So it's a relatively small proportion.
And there's some complications as a result of surgery too, and injury, traumatic injury that can cause ED, gunshot wounds, car accidents, things like that too. It's kind of what
you guys have a lot of those here?
Trying to get fewer.
Yeah.
So what we want to show guys out there is we're really good with the treatments and we have excellent surgeries, but what can you do at home naturally? And if you guys don't mind, I have my physiotherapist. He's actually my personal trainer, and he only wants me to come to the gym at a certain time. So Carl, do you mind just 30 seconds telling us, I know there's something about certain time of the day that you should work out rather than that you can boost your testosterone naturally. And this worked because I actually had mine checked after I did his routine, and it did work. So there are natural ways as well. So when is it and what time is it?
Yeah, so actually, Dr. Bodie, you actually put a great slide up there about the testosterone graph throughout the day, and I've written about this a little bit just on the seeing the research side that testosterone is high in the morning, but it also has a ratio to cortisol, and when the ratio of testosterone to cortisol is the highest is in the afternoon. So when I want my athletes to gain the most strength or gain the most benefit from their workouts, I actually have them do it later in the afternoon, 5 or 6 o'clock. Do you have any insight into the cortisol, how that interacts, I should say?
Yeah, I know that cortisol tends to be higher in the morning, but I've not had, I'm not much on exercise physiology, so I hadn't really ever checked cortisol to testosterone ratios.
Okay, but when I do recommend that for my athletes, I do recommend in the afternoon because of that reason.
Yeah, so that's one thing. I know there's been a lot of stuff about when to exercise and naturally boost it, but this is pretty cool that if you exercise at a certain time, then you may boost it naturally. Now, erectile dysfunction, very common problem, and I know because where we were, we didn't discuss it in much detail, but there are very good treatment options out there. But what are some things that men can do to prevent ever even getting erectile dysfunction? Because you mentioned some of the risk factors for it. What do you think we can tell men out there that they should be doing today while they're watching this to avoid ever needing any medication or any kind of surgery?
Well, I'm not a clinician, so I'm going to have to speak more as an engineer and from an observational standpoint. But what I've been told and what I believe to be true is you want to stay in shape.
Yeah.
That's why listen to the physical therapist. You want to stay active. The more active you stay, the less your body deteriorates. So it's just a matter of keeping in shape. That's the main thing I can recommend.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think erectile dysfunction is not a medical entity in and of itself. In the 20 to 40-year-old population, they may have some veno-occlusive dysfunction, venous leak, and or sometimes some performance anxiety issues. But in the more common man that we see in the clinic for erectile dysfunction, they're in the 50 to 70-year-old age group, and it's very important that you can't just prescribe Viagra and not look at the person as a whole. Erectile dysfunction there's a ton of data showing that erectile dysfunction is an early warning sign for heart disease, and they're really the same disease. The penile arteries are probably affected first because they're smaller, but ED and coronary artery disease, stroke, all have the same main risk factors. Smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, inactivity, family history of heart disease. So I will, as a routine, work on treating their erectile dysfunction, whatever it is, with medications or in some cases surgery. But I will mention that this is a part of a systemic problem, and they may want to continue to manage or start to manage their comorbidities, and even consider a referral to a preventative cardiologist. So there's data showing that the severity of ED corresponds to the number of coronary arteries diseased, the extent of coronary artery disease. ED is an early warning sign for, it can be an early predictor for cardiac events. If you look at men with a cardiac event, probably 20% of them have ED.
So what we tell guys is, go ahead, Tim.
There's one, Dr. Tim's expertise is actually as an engineer, and if you do end up requiring some treatments for ED, there are some new and innovative devices being developed, and I wanted to make sure that we get a chance to hear about some of these new developments as well. So hopefully most of the guys out there won't need this. This is what you need to avoid. But if you get to that point, there are some great treatment options as well. And Dr. Tim, if you could just tell us a little bit about the new devices.
Yeah, it was actually, just to give it a little bit of history, I showed you about the artificial urinary sphincter, and it was actually when we were working on the development of the artificial sphincter, we were trying to come up with a way to develop the artificial sphincter cuff, which, imagine like a blood pressure cuff, miniaturized and made out of implantable grade materials. And this was a collaborative effort. We had a number of engineering students and physicians, urology fellows that would regularly come and work in our laboratory. And one of the students at one point was using one of these little slinky balloons, these little long things, that you can make dogs and cats and chickens and hats and things out of. And he was blowing it up and down, and the urologist said, well, could you put that in somebody's penis and give them an erection? And I said, well, you're the urologist, I'm just an engineer, we can probably do just about anything if you tell us what it is you want. And so, anyway, that led to the development of the inflatable penile implant. Using the same kind of hydraulics as we use for the sphincter, we developed the inflatable penile implant. This was before Viagra. Just for your information, this happened in the early 70s. It's when it was first developed. It's been perfected and improved considerably since that time. But in 1985, the company that we started to develop that and commercialize that product was American Medical Systems, got purchased by Pfizer. And it was in 1989 that there was a scientist in the UK who was working on the development of an antihypertensive medication, and ultimately came to be known as Viagra, which they introduced in 1997. And I still say to this day they would have never developed or even made that observation, or unlikely they would have made that observation, had they not owned American Medical Systems and seen that there was a legitimate human need for it. And hopefully, like you just said, not everybody's going to need it, but it is there, and it's available, and it's a very reliable solution for those that need that.
Your story shows how collaboration can lead to some very exciting things, and that's why we're very excited that you know, we're able to drive and have local drivers here in Minnesota for the Drive for Men's Health. Now, you guys know these statistics, and our viewers probably have these memorized by now, but men just don't take care of themselves like they should. You know, we through Orlando Health did a study, and we asked 2 simple questions to 1,000 men. The first question was, what was the make and model of your first car? Mine was a Toyota Camry. Do you guys remember what yours was?
Ford F-150.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Plymouth.
A Plymouth. And Sidjo's?
Mine was a Nissan Sentra.
It was not a Tesla. That was not his first car. Over 81% of men remember the make and model of their first car. Only half remember their last doctor's appointment. So that shows that guys remember technology, cars, toys, much more than actually their health. So I think it's pretty cool that in this case we can use things like this car and Apple Watches and, you know, events like this to engage men. And I know we've definitely made an impact because we've got a lot of people excited. If you look at our social media campaign, that guys are asking questions. We even have instances where women are messaging us saying, hey, I made an appointment for my husband with a doctor next week. So I think it's pretty cool, and I'm so happy and honored to be here in Minnesota with you guys. I'm on this collaborative effort to change a lot of those statistics that we've discussed here and we continue to see that are going against the health of men.
And I really applaud your effort, and I think, you know, as we were speaking earlier with Mary Jo from our department, she said women talk about women's issues all the time, breast cancer, you know, everything that they're very comfortable with, and men are not comfortable talking about their needs, and they're not really comfortable probably asking somebody for help. So a lot of times, many times it's a spouse or a family member that brings the fellow in to see the physician. So listen to your spouses, your friends, your family.
Absolutely.
Fellows.
Yeah, I think women starting at around age 13 get a monthly reminder of their health, and they are just, I think, inherently, because of that, more in tune with their health. And men don't have that reminder. You kind of have the same day. You get up, you eat, you use the bathroom, you shower, but you don't get that monthly reminder of your health. And so I think that's one of the main inherent reasons why men they get focused on other things, work, career, and not so much their health. And I was going to say something. I had another thought, but I forgot what it was.
It's all right. And I agree with you. It's getting guys to remember their health. And we're hoping that when guys go and get their oil changed, that could be their 3,000-mile reminder or 5,000-mile reminder that they need to take care of themselves. So thank you guys so much for hosting us. And we've had a fantastic visit here, and we look forward to coming back and growing with you guys. And hopefully the numbers that we mentioned today, the statistics, will change next year. I don't know if it's possible to change something, a big mountain in 1 year, but I know we're going to do it, and I'm glad that we're going to do it together. So thank you so much for hosting us. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick picture
Thanks
in front
for
of the car. Yeah. We're going to take a quick picture in front of the car, and then we're going to go live again on our web stream probably around 2 o'clock, so we'll see you guys then. Thank you. It's the future. I don't think it's going to be a fad like microwave and tuna. I think this is here to stay.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
You mentioned patient selection, so I think one thing is, you know, the whole media logo.